Stop. I can't take it anymore.
Oh, I do the live ones too. Yes, I know. I saw your act in the theater. You're really quite good.
Quite a certain harmful habit.
Stop it now, I mean it.
I don't think he felt anything after the crash.
Hello and welcome back. We are breaking up with RBS. This is episode number 29. I'm Tawny Santabria.
And I am JDK Winnikin. We are here to debunk the junk. Those BS stories that no longer serve us. How do we break up with them? Whatever they might be. And hopefully by the time you're at episode 29 with us, you've realized BS stories are pretty much everywhere. Or they can be found anywhere.
Yeah.
Or manufactured out of anything. Right.
Yeah.
So fortunately, the good news is we can do something about it. So
yes, we can.
So here we are. So back again. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all a blur always, though. You ask me, how am I every week? And I'm thinking, how am I?
And, you know, it's such a simple question. And yet, it, like you said, I think if anytime you see somebody, how are you? I mean, they could tell you in the moment, yeah, I'm feeling great right now. But there's always sort of the implied that's bigger than that, right? How have things been, maybe, or how are you in general? Or, you know,
Life's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been getting great sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been working out.
You were telling me earlier that your dog is the one to make sure that you work out every single day.
My dog loves the assault runner, the treadmill that she can make go herself. I taught her with me when she was a puppy. I thought, oh, how cute is this going to be that we're going to walk on this thing together and we'll get some videos and it's going to be amazing. Well, now she is a hog.
She's a personal trainer for you. Get on board.
Yes. And but I can never use it anymore.
Oh, wow.
If she's out there with me. So I do other things and she runs and then we're good for the day.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, and nothing like a dog to cheer you up.
Yes.
You ever need it? Yeah, they're real good for that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway, well, same for me. It's been a bit of a blurry week, and they almost always are, right? Because every week that goes by, I've experienced in some way, shape, or form the entire spectrum on some level of emotional states and all of that. So, but I guess it's not so good to say every time someone asks you, "How are you?" Well, same as every other week. After a while, they stop asking.
Right. That's just not interesting anymore.
Care.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've had some really interesting discussions the past couple weeks. A couple weeks ago, we talked about expectations in relationships, and then it was last week was about relationships even further. I mean, we dove into a lot, and last week we ended up finishing up talking about agreements and all that. And it's interesting.
Yeah.
Each one of these conversations kind of gives us a sense of what's coming next. So
they're never finished.
Right. And I honestly think you could mix up all of our episodes in various order and they would all connect together.
Yes.
Somehow.
Probably. You wouldn't be too lost.
Which is part of the magic,
yes.
Everyone. So
there's a method.
There is. So picking up from there with agreements, where do you want to go today?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I clarify something about agreements from last week.
Sure.
So, if you haven't noticed yet, I can get sort of not stuck, but deep with what words mean, right? Like I really want to get clear about what words mean, when I'm communicating with somebody, or if we're talking about something in particular. I just like clarity rather than just sort of like, I think we talked about commitment like last time, and I was wondering what is this commitment conversation, right?
What do we really mean by commitment when we say the word?
Yes, right. Yes. And that commitment can mean something different for me than for you. Completely, or just in subtle ways. And if we're not really understanding that, then we could be talking, we could, here we are we're talking about commitment. We're both on the same page with what commitment means. And then not that we were last week, but we can then be having some hard conversations or some conflict around it, right? Because we're feeling energetically that we're not on the same page with something. Anyways, agreements, right? When I was talking about agreements last week, I was really feeling that agreements were sort of this ongoing, kind of like our conversations. Conversations don't ever end,
Right.
right? They
Right.
just are, they prime us for the next one,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
I feel like agreements for me are similar. Like no agreement is like a static, okay, we've made this agreement with each other and off we go, never to have to rearrange or check in with each other around this agreement.
Mhm.
Right. So I feel like it's kind of like a dynamic thing when I think about agreements.
So they're a living thing.
Yeah,
Right. They're a
absolutely.
living thing. I
Mhm,
mean, and I guess in
mhm.
that sense, a commitment would be as well. A commitment is a form of agreement, no matter what it looks like.
Yeah. And action oriented.
Action. That's big.
Right. Right. So
That's big.
we're always sort of doing this agreement dance or commitment dance. There's fluidity to it. It can be dynamic. We come
Mhm.
back to it. We move away from it for a hot second maybe, but then oh gosh, we have to come back to this and make sure
Mhm.
we are in alignment with each other.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
part of and I think it's important that you said that. I mean, I think that
Mhm.
that particularly when we're talking about the importance of being present, right? This is
Mhm.
a whole presence thing.
Yeah.
So in the present, these things are always open to action, right? I can see where some people might get tripped up and say, "Well, how do you ever know that you can trust an agreement that you made if you're always having to stay in the moment with it?" And I think the way you just described it is exactly that, is knowing that, okay, this is the agreement, and then you have to act accordingly and still be open when something needs to be adjusted or have a conversation. But we tend not to, particularly in relationships, we tend not to react initially too well when somebody maybe wants to reevaluate something, or if somebody doesn't follow through from what the other person thinks they should, right?
Mhm.
But
Yes.
that's and of course that's why the communication on this is so key.
Right, and, getting clear about what terms mean when we're even making agreements.
Right. What the words mean.
Right,
Right.
it's gonna be really important.
Yeah, I guess that's why lawyers, when they go over agreements for court, spend a lot of time on language
Yes, probably.
because of what
Mhm.
the implications could be if a certain word isn't agreed
Yes.
upon, or okay.
But hopefully, we don't have to make relationships that complicated with all those terms that
Hopefully
nobody
not.
knows what means
Right.
except the attorneys, right?
Right. So yeah. Usually when attorneys are involved in relationships, it means there's something bigger is wrong at
Yes.
that point.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay. So,
But speaking of that,
yes.
conflict.
Well, right. Because that's what I was suggesting, right? Is what happens when, because I think a lot of people sometimes think with relationships that you have these agreements, whatever they are. And then if something seems to be out of whack with them, that's conflict or that's a problem. You're suggesting that if we stay in the space of that's just known, that change continues to happen, and that those fluctuations happen and those renegotiations happen, you can kind of have an easier time
Yeah.
in relationships.
Mhm.
So conflict, though, seems to be maybe sometimes comes from the fact that those agreements aren't always being followed, or there's fear that they won't, or
I
that they're changing.
it's conflict would be one of those words that we, might have a lot of different ideas about.
Mhm. Yeah, could be
Um
much like agreements and commitment. And
Mhm. Right. So what is conflict?
are you asking me?
Well, how would you if somebody didn't know what that term meant at all, how would you
Um, see, I automatically go to a headspace.
Mm.
A disagreement over something, a disagreement or a differing opinion. But conflict gives it an edge to me.
Mm.
Like if you're in conflict, of course, this is
Mhm.
the historian, right? Conflicts or wars or conflicts or police actions or whatever. So I tend to think of it in terms of butting heads, problems, tension, um, and something that has to be won or resolved.
Oh, won or resolved. Yeah.
Won or
Okay.
resolved, right? In a conflict, something has to come out on top. If there are two ideas competing with one another, one needs to be more true than the
Mm.
other. That's just a series of assumptions, right? I realize, but yeah,
Yeah.
conflict is not supposed to feel is supposed to feel bad, or always will feel bad. Will kind of be gross. Something to avoid, something to fix.
So it's not good.
It's not good. No, historically, that's how I've always understood it. Conflict is not good. You don't want to be in conflict with somebody, right?
Okay.
As much as it depends on you, be at peace with everyone. That's how I grew up. That's actually a scriptural quote, believe it or not. I can't do that very well,
But
but I just did right there.
is that reasonable? Like
I don't think so.
okay, if as you were describing conflict,
Mhm.
disagreement.
Right.
So, is conflict the absence of agreement?
Hmm. I don't think so.
Okay.
But only by you asking that question
Mhm.
would I once upon a time have been willing to or been able to even look at that
Right.
possibility.
And an absence of agreement happens all the time,
Right. Right.
every day.
What do we call that?
I don't know. Well, that's what I'm wondering about conflict,
Mhm.
right? We've made it feels like a yucky thing. It feels like, although, conflict in relationships, one of the things that when I worked with couples over the past, it's not where we've worked is the conflict isn't really because conflict's going to happen, right?
Mhm.
That's not really the trouble. The trouble or the key is not the absence of conflict, but the key is how do we repair it? So that comes after the conflict.
That comes after, right.
But we're not gonna talk about what comes after today. We're just kind of wondering about what makes for conflict.
Okay. Okay. So
What do you think?
so probably good to define terms a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Because obviously if we're talking about physical conflict,
Physical conflict would be a very clear problem.
that's a clear problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And that is not what we're referring to here.
No.
Right. The
Mm-mm.
idea of not calling that conflict or anything that involves, interventions or
Safety
safety,
is important,
physical
harm.
safety, emotional safety, abuse of any kind, that type of thing.
Sure.
Okay. So we're talking about the type of things that we call conflict within the normal bounds of relationships.
Right. So when if I'm uncomfortable because you're yelling at me.
Have I ever yelled at you?
No, I don't think so, because that's why I felt it was safe to be able to say that, right? Like,
All right. So hypothetical.
yeah, hypothetical.
Yes, everybody. I've
Okay.
never yelled at her.
Yeah. I might have yelled no.
No. You may have.
I don't
I know
think so.
you've wanted to.
I might have
before.
wanted to. Yeah, it's true. It's the redhead thing. But anyways, that's
Well,
another story.
again,
Anyways.
that's yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah. Okay. So perhaps you come from a family where loud voices,
Mhm.
passionate tone
Yeah.
is common and familiar.
No, but let's go.
I
From the
know.
exact opposite.
Another hypothetical.
Hypothetical, but
right.
that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go with that. So
Okay.
I'm used to that. A lot of loud noises, a lot of
Mhm.
butting heads,
Yeah.
a lot of real high energy.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm. So you've normalized that.
Mhm.
That's kind of how you do things, right?
Okay.
And I've come from a family who, doesn't really communicate much. We're, each person in the family maybe is responsible for their own internalizing
Oh,
of
yeah.
whatever they feel like a problem might be. They're just kind
Okay.
of on their own to deal with that, right? So here we are, and we're in a system, a relationship system, right? And
Mhm.
here we are communicating.
In theory.
Yes. And well, we're in a system ourselves because we
Correct.
are podcast
Oh, you mean the two of
partners.
us?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Gotcha. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, but
Okay.
you're not a yeller, whatever. I'm more of a anyways,
Internalizer.
right.
Got it.
So
That's
we
our
have
backgrounds.
conversation.
Okay.
So we have to have conversation. And we find ourselves where you're talking really loud and I'm deciding it's conflict.
Mm,
Is that conflict?
no.
Oh, right? Like I might decide that it is conflict, but what if I decide it's conflict?
Right. Because that's when a perception is determining what we think is the reality of going on. That's a BS story.
It could be.
It could be.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess it depends what I'm yelling about.
Could be. Could
Okay.
be. But if it's that you're yelling means I'm uncomfortable,
Mm,
maybe my stress response is kicked in.
you want me to stop, maybe.
Yep, and I've decided it's conflict.
Okay.
What do we do with that? Right? Because then to fix that, right? If we decide conflict needs to be fixed.
Mhm.
To fix that, you have to be different.
That's right.
I'm just wondering. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question to wonder about. I guess I would start. I don't want to start splitting hairs, but like, if you felt that this was a personal attack on you, and I'm yelling, you might feel the same if I was saying it calmly, but was still attacking you, right? You might still feel that as conflict. right? But if it's just just the voice or something
Mhm.
like that, and you want me to stop, are you afraid to tell me that I should stop, that it causes you stress, that it causes you anxiety?
No, I would say,
Okay.
"You're yelling." And you would say,
No, I'm not.
"Exactly.
I'm just having an animated conversation,
This is the way I talk."
right? Yeah, that's a difference.
And
That's just a difference of experience and difference of perspective.
Mhm.
Okay, so I can tell what people will be wondering. It's like, okay, what do you do?
Right.
All right.
Right. Exactly. So if though this conversation is conflictual, like we can't talk about it because it's conflict,
Oh,
where do we go? What do we do?
well, I know for me, where I hope I would go would be to take that in from you because you're the person I'm in communication with
Mhm.
and in this system, this relational system that we have.
Mhm.
And I care about that. So I want to take seriously that you're feeling conflict or acknowledge it, right? Say, oh, wow, wow, okay, you don't like that very
Mhm.
much. My inclination is then like exactly what you just said. I need to change. I need
Mhm.
to stop doing that. I need to not put you in a position where you are feeling such and such. And yet there's a part of me, even as I say that, I was like, I'm not so sure about that because I don't want to be the person in charge of whether or not you're okay with what I'm doing,
Right.
at least in this sense,
Mhm.
right? In this scenario.
So my stress response is my stress response,
Hmm.
right? So if if we can look at that as not about if we can use a different word for it about this sort of dance
Rather than conflict.
rather than conflict or whatever else we're going to make a problem out of it.
Hmm.
You're a yeller
Hmm.
and that creates problems.
Oh, okay. I don't know what the word is,
Mhm.
but I'm sensing this is how we get to some sort of agreement
Yeah.
on this dynamic.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. I don't know what the word is, though. Do you know what the word is? What's the word we're looking for?
Oh, I'm not sure. Am I supposed to know?
I don't know. You're smiling at me like
I don't know if there has to be a word,
there might not. That's a good point.
except that if it's conflict and conflict is bad,
Mhm.
then we have a problem.
Yeah.
So, but if it's I'm aware of my stress response and I'm aware that this is familiar.
Mhm.
The your tone and the loudness of
This is
your
how I
tone
roll
is
sometimes.
is a part of how you communicate.
Mhm.
And I have my own I'm not familiar with it because I didn't grow up with it.
Mhm.
And so it gets me a little fight or flighty or freezy in my
Mhm.
stress response.
Right.
Right. Right.
Okay. Well, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Finish your thought.
Right. So and if I know how to work with my stress response, right, I'm going to be able to calm and get safe in my body and recenter myself.
Mhm.
And we're going to be able to talk about is this something that needs to be fixed or do I maybe it just needs to be something I can get a little more familiar with.
Mm.
Maybe it doesn't have to be a conflict.
Yeah. Well, and what comes up for me with that is that on my side of this, if I can get
Mhm.
into my belly, get centered,
Mhm.
soften, and see that,
Mhm.
right? And be able to connect. That's where that connection piece is. Then call it what you will. There's empathy or just recognition that that's something that happens for you. Then I'm going to be in a spot where I can better see what I'm doing,
Mhm.
take a look at my own responses. Am I getting loud because I'm having my own stress response?
Yeah, maybe.
If that's the case, or whatever the case may be, being aware that that's happening is going to put me in the position where, from my side, we're going to be able to have that conversation about, does this need to be something I'm worrying about? Does it need to be something you need to get used to? Um, and then if there needs to be an agreement, we can start having that. So then say we get to there, say we both do that.
Mhm.
What would the conversation be like? Like if we had to make an agreement, what would be like
Well,
a good agreement?
and we don't even need to know that because in a calm state, we're gonna
It's
get there.
not a problem anymore. So you're gonna get there.
We're gonna get there, whatever that means.
Oh.
right? We're going to be able to navigate and make and negotiate and make an agreement that would fit for us.
It'll be connective
Mhm.
based on that uniqueness of this system.
Yes. Yes.
That makes a lot of sense. So it would be something that the agreement would be more arrived at
yes.
rather than manufactured.
Mhm.
That resonates a lot
Mhm.
because I know that I have experienced that where probably without being able to give it a name or just specifically saying, I, JD, hereby agree to, and
Never
the
yell
person,
ever again.
right. Where that kind of understanding or that kind of understand perspective, whatever the word is.
Yeah.
Boy, words are tricky. No wonder you spend so much time on them. We throw them
Yeah.
around a lot of times in ways that maybe we don't always fully understand. And if you call something a conflict, it automatically adds in
Mhm.
stress fuel, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Right?
Yes.
Those cortisol levels go up, the
Mhm.
stress goes up.
Mhm. And then we make up problems that don't need to be problems.
Yeah. This is really interesting. You know what just came to mind for me
Hmm.
is a quote by Satchel Paige. Have you ever heard of Satchel Paige?
I
You know?
have. Mhm.
Okay, Satchel Paige, of course, the great baseball pitcher from really his heyday was the 30s, but pitched in the Negro Leagues for years, most famously with the Kansas City Monarchs. And then he didn't come in to play Major League Baseball till after Jackie Robinson had broken the color barrier in 1947. And then he was in his 40s by the time he started pitching for the Cleveland Indians. But he was a quote machine. Besides being maybe the best pitcher of all time, a lot of people think he was that good. He also was a quote machine. And he said something about age that for whatever reason popped into my head. And he said, age is mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't mind it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. If
Right?
you don't make a problem, it's not a
Mhm.
problem.
Right. He also once said about age, he also said, if you didn't know how old you were, how old would you guess you are? Something like that. Right. So if you don't mind, it don't matter. That's what comes up to me. He was talking about age, but it sounds to me like we could probably say that about a lot of things, at least in the everyday kind of things that bring up conflict, like the example we just used.
Yes. And a lot of words have a problematic meaning.
Mhm.
Not the meaning's not problematic, but it means
Means a
we're
problem.
looking at a problem.
Means a problem.
Mhm.
And so we can automatically identify something as a problem that maybe doesn't need to be one.
And really isn't one.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But it almost like, I don't know if we've heard conflict as a problem for so long that just even saying the word means, okay, something needs to be resolved or fixed or solved.
Mhm.
I better
Mhm.
pay attention to what this is.
Right. And that person across the way has to stop doing that because I feel this, or,
Mhm.
I need to stop doing this because they feel that. I know for me in my own life, that's been a recipe for its own set of problems. Because, if I have to stop doing something, a part of me goes, oh, they don't like that part of me, or there's something wrong with me, or something wrong with that.
Mhm.
Right. That doesn't feel good. Right. And I don't particularly really want anybody changing what they're doing for me either. Although sometimes I suppose we all act like we wish somebody else did things differently.
Well, we're gonna change anyway.
Right.
We're gonna change whether we work really hard at changing or not. We just might change in a variety of different directions, but we're gonna
Mhm.
change anyway, right? Like, change is gonna happen.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. So
Mhm.
if you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Right. And we're not talking about mind as in the mind space, but
Right.
like, does something bother you? If you choose for it not to bother you,
Mhm.
again, not talking about over tolerating things that shouldn't be tolerated, but in these types of things that we tend to label as conflict,
Mhm. Mhm.
if you don't mind, they
Mhm.
cease to matter.
We've made a lot of regular human life scenarios as a problem.
Yeah.
And certainly some of them are when
Sure.
safety
Sure.
and harm is concerned,
Sure.
for sure.
Of course.
But we like to solve problems. So it's pretty stimulating to solve problems, right? So sometimes we notice anything that can remotely be
Oh my
a
gosh.
problem.
Yes. Yes, we can. And then suddenly once we call it that, it is one,
Yes.
even
Yes.
if it doesn't have to be one.
Yes.
And that's the kind of the key distinction we're making here, right? We're at, is what in there is actually the truth and what is a BS story. Mainly not that the feelings are BS, but the idea of what the reality isn't true necessarily.
And if my stress response is activated, and if I've decided that that means there's a problem,
Mm-hmm.
then that's also going to lend itself to more problems.
Mm-hmm.
And the stress response is there as an indicator.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. It's not a problem. It's not a problem indicator. It's a stress response indicator.
Yeah.
But we make it, I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because you're doing something that's making me uncomfortable. You need to
Mhm.
change what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And just because I'm uncomfortable,
That doesn't mean the change has to be external
it doesn't.
from somebody else.
Mhm.
Right. It doesn't.
Mhm.
And so often it can be that.
Mhm.
Right. That's interesting because we've been told from so many quarters for so long now that we're supposed to take our own feelings very seriously, which we are, which we should. We should pay attention to them. And yet, that's the thing. I've always sort of wondered that is like, how do you know when your feelings are based in reality and when they aren't? Because if it's a stressor response from something in the past, that's in the past, and it might actually have a real direct effect on how you are now, but not necessarily on what you decide to do. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. If then we can't be in the present,
Uh-huh.
right? We're always living based off of something that occurred in the past, maybe when we were a child and we didn't have say.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we're bringing it into present moment. We're uncomfortable and we want to stay comfortable. So then another person needs to change what they're
Mhm.
doing so that we can stay comfortable, even though right now in this moment, we could decide to get into our safety system.
Yes. Yes. And have, at least if nothing else, an opportunity to really take a good look at it from a safe space.
Yeah.
Where all this is coming from, what needs to be done, if anything, what might need to be mentioned to this person if it's your partner, even if it's just sharing what you were just feeling. And there's no big conversation needs to happen about agreements or whatever.
Yeah. Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. When we're safe
Mm-hmm.
in the body, there's less problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what we're saying, of course, is that we can get to that safer spot more easily and more readily than we think. And that's when we talk about softening and getting into the belly, that's sort of the place to go when those responses come up, whatever those feelings are, without making them a problem. I'm stressed. I'm feeling attacked. I'm upset. I'm lonely, whatever it might be, without making those a problem. Go into that process, that practice, I guess,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
helps us better differentiate between what the story is and what the reality is.
Right. And so that's the big takeaway is even if the practice isn't dialed in yet, your body is wired to
Mhm.
handle your stress response.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
The more that we are able to learn to do that and practice that, of course,
Right.
the less conflict we're going to have.
And then therefore more ease,
Mhm.
more enjoyment, more connection. Yeah. And it really is true. I've experienced more of that. You know, my life is just as busy with just as many hurdles as it's always had, but I can say I have far fewer problems.
Mhm.
And
Nice.
only because I've noticed that I've manufactured a lot of them.
Well, it's fun, right?
Well,
Yeah,
it gives
I
us
know.
this weird sense of purpose, I
It
think,
does.
sometimes. Anyway.
Anyways.
Okay. Well, that was great. Thank you for the
Mhm.
clarification. And I hope you all enjoyed that conversation about conflict as much as we did. Make sure you stay tuned with us for next week and check out our YouTube channel at Breaking Up with Our BS, our Facebook page of the same name. Check us out on your favorite podcast platform, wherever you find it. And please subscribe and leave comments. We'd appreciate it. And until next week, I am JDK Winnikin.
And I'm Tawny Santabria.
Thanks for joining us.
Mhm.
See you later.
I need it up front.